Yeah. All right, everyone. We'll let the folks that are coming in get in. We're about 30 seconds away from starting, and get in, get settled, and we will start the show momentarily. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to eduKan TV, and today's topic is technology and students' use of technology, faculty's use of technology, all the stuff that's going on, the demands on the faculty. Dr. Adrian Sanier will be joining us. He has been called into, I'm guessing, a technology meeting. He was going to be our technology advocate. So I will play the role of Adrian until he joins us. And Dr. Jim Wallis is joining us. Saw Jim at a conference and he made a presentation. He is very funny. He's quick-witted, and so we're going to have just a great show today. First and foremost, some housekeeping. You have the ability to send in questions, and for both of us, once Adrian gets here, you can send those questions in, comments, and we will convey those on the air and answer those. So with that, Jim, would you just take a second and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, how you got to where you are, and maybe why you're going to be the anti-technology advocate for all those faculty members who are watching today saying, stop shoving this technology on me. You are their man. There's a lot of responsibility on you today.
Well, that's good, though. It gives me something to do. So my name is Dr. Jim Wallis. I am an instructor at St. Petersburg College. I teach biology. I'm actually an entomologist for bugs, which is always fun. But I got interested in educational technology kind of at the onset. I've always liked the field. I always think it supplements the classroom. But in the last few years, it's kind of interesting. I finished up doing my dissertation work a few years back on virtual environments. And one of the things I found was that there's a great deal of disparity between what we kind of want in education and what we're, in terms of technology, and what we're actually getting. I'm a big advocate for the use of appropriate educational technology, but it's interesting. In the last few years, we've seen it as at least from my personal perspective, I got interested in when we started seeing it being used as a Band-Aid approach to some of the more poorly designed curriculums. And with the explosion of online course offerings, we've seen universities adopting to what I think in some cases is somewhat of a questionable approach to the use of technology online. But in the classroom, it's even more so because, you're face-to-face with students and we're using it to hopefully increase the effectiveness of our our instruction. But in many cases, we're dealing with a group of instructors and technologists and administrators who, don't necessarily have a cohesive idea. So I'm always interested in kind of looking at how schools apply it. And one of the things, like you and I had talked about at the conference, was that, it's amazing how much we value technology without necessarily understanding the technology. And so I got involved a lot more from the idea of advocacy of appropriate technology, not using it for every problem, but the idea of where is it best used and where is it sometimes, let's just go back to the regular style. So, and like I said, my students in many cases, the presentation you saw at the conference was the idea of our students have technology without actually knowing how to use it. And that affects our instruction. It affects our pedagogy, the idea that we can effectively teach by using technology, get them to understand better, and in many cases we're missing the mark. So it's been a long thing. I've been in the educational part of, or the technology part of education for a long time, and we all have hope. I know most of us in this field think it's a great idea, but I think somewhere along the line we kind of went a little bit off the rails in terms of where we apply it at. It's not going to correct bad teaching. It's going to be something that we need to find an appropriate application for.
It just actually speeds the promulgation of really bad teaching. When it's bad, we can now really give bad instruction a lot easily, or a lot more easily. Talk to me a minute about, and again, I'm not going to ask you to talk about your school in particular, because we would really like you to stay employed. But
that's a good idea.
Just as you've talked to other faculty members, whether it's in your discipline or at different conferences, what's the feeling? Do students have more technology, a better understanding of the technology than maybe the faculty who are trying to teach them?
Well, I think that's a mixed bag question, because we're looking at the fact that students are, and to some degree faculty, they want the newest gadget, the newest iPhone, the newest Mac. You have the Mac Air now, and the new ones are coming out. But in most cases, they're using it for email, YouTube viewing, and a few very simple tasks that you could do with a netbook. And so they buy fairly sophisticated systems for something that you could use anything for. You could use something 10 years old. And then the same thing in the classroom. We think that newer is better. So we want to buy all this technology out. I don't know if there is that many technologically literate educators out there to the degree where they understand both the actual theory as well as the technology. To me, it's an interesting question. Does a person use technology because it makes their lessons look better, or do they really understand the integration of technology? So I think that, on both sides we have very technologically literate folks, and on both sides we have very technologically illiterate folks. And then we have a very large pool of people who are, fairly astute, casual users of technology. And that is kind of the gearing of the crowd, is that, just because you can text message on your phone or send pictures doesn't put you in a Microsoft programming category. And so we have to be careful what we assume. I mean, my students can do amazing stuff with an iPhone that I can't do with my iPhone. But on the other hand, they have a very hard time logging into, the learning management system. So, or they send me emails and then they say in the email, oh, I don't know how to email you. Well, you kind of just did, but they don't understand that the LMS's email system is like the same thing. So, and it's funny because this back and forth thing, and as you know from the conference, and a lot of the folks out there who are looking at this know, we use it as kind of the poster child for how well we're doing. Technology makes us great. We are great because we have technology. But the problem is that it's a prop. It's a prop we use in the classroom. It's a very good prop. We love it. I would never think of removing it, but I would say that we need to rethink the process we're going through on this whole idea.
How about faculty support on the technology? I mean, it's great to have the smart classroom. It's great to have these tools that can enable some really neat pedagogy. But how much training are faculty members really receiving? And training that is not just here's how you use the machine, but here is how the machine can better how you're teaching, how the students are learning.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. In many cases, from schools I've seen, we have IT departments that are geared towards, making the faculty literate with the material. And the thing that you and I both know, a lot of people know, is there's more than one level to technology. You can be a user where you just plug in and play. You can be a medium level user where you have some idea of how to manipulate the system, and then you can work at the basic, the heart of the machine. And very few instructors can work at the heart. And that's the problem, is that you're going to use the system as it was given to you. So I would say the first thing we would look at for literacy among instructors would be, we don't have many people who can actually work with the system and make it better. I hand you technology, I hand you a computer, you can either just use it to check the internet in your mail, or you could do some powerful things. And in many cases, faculty don't get that. And then we have the folks that they're still using the basics, so they don't get the stuff they need out of the technology. The students, I don't know, it's an interesting idea. They come into school and they use the technology, in some cases in the classroom, as we well know, for things that are not classroom related. But when you want them to use the technology appropriately within the classroom, then they have a hard time. And so getting them to stick with it in terms of educational use is a problem. It's the ultimate in distraction in some cases. The idea that it's so pretty, I must look into it, the light to a moth kind of idea. But at the same time, they're using it in almost, I'd say, reflexive way. They use it as a way to occupy time, or, it makes my note taking easier. But you'll see them with the computer still writing handwritten notes out, which seems to be a paradox. Why would you have a computer write notes on and still write notes on paper? So, I don't know if we have consistency in leveling. There's no way for us to judge the leveling of both. So
how do you see the use of cell phones in the classroom?
You mean from the instrument of Satan side, or from the educational technology side?
Students are bringing the textbooks into class, or they're bringing their textbooks. Hopefully, they're bringing their smartphones into class, and but we as teachers, we tell them, put that away, put that, bit of technology that you brought in, a very valuable and very powerful piece of technology, put that away, because, we're going to educate you, and we're going to ask you to regurgitate some information back to us, and you may be able to look that information up if you use your smartphone.
But isn't that, that's in some ways the use of appropriate tools, isn't it? I don't like the cell phone in class being used to text message where you're going for lunch that day, which the vast majority of their conversations are, hi, I'm in class, where are you going to be next? But at the same time, there is a potential there. The most ubiquitous device we have are phones. So where in that spectrum can we find a way? Could I not have a phone list where I simultaneously text message all my students in class a message that says, hey, here's what we're getting ready to head for? Or, half the class and say, look at your partner and say, here's the question for the day. I think there's a definite potential in there. The problem is that we just see the bad, the instrument of the devil, the thing that distracts them from that. And here's another thing to think about, is everybody has their own tolerances for cell phones. In my class, they shouldn't be using them, but they're extremely tricky in using them. But I kind of overlook it if it's not going to burden it down, because I have found that students who are using their cell phones, in many cases, are paying attention. And so I would like to say that's a problem. So, it's to me, if we could get a better educational use out of cell phones, since everybody has them and since they're so powerful, that would be fantastic. But we have given them such a stigma, you tell me who's going to be the one to volunteer that conference talk. So, hey, let them bring the cell phones into class. We'll make them useful. And in the middle of the class, you're text messaging everybody. Well, you're right there. It violates the thing we already said, which is if you're going to have them in class, talk to them. But in some cases, that's a more viable option to reach them. They're more willing to text you rather than opening their mouth in class. It takes away the stigma of standing up and saying something. But sure. I think that's a problem we're going to be beating ourselves in the head with for a while.
And I know faculty members who will say, I go out to my Twitter feed and I'll talk to you about social media, because I know you're very passionate about social media. But if you have a question and you don't feel comfortable raising your hand in class, tweet it, and, I'll look at it here and answer that question without embarrassing you. And so I think that's a pretty smart use of technology to get a student to engage who might otherwise not want to just raise their hand and say, I don't understand this answer. So
I agree. I think in some ways we have to give those students who are not willing to put themselves out there a venue. And unfortunately, the thing we don't see in schools is providing a school-based social media where you could do that. Instead of having Twitter and all those other things, where are the development of those social media products that would be useful in the classroom, something specifically geared to education where a student could not only send a text message, but a picture of, something they don't understand in the book or why it's very interesting we have a kind of a schizophrenic approach to that particular technology. We have clicker technology, which is almost like cell phones, and it's good, but it's limited. So why not expand it more and have some interface there?
Right. Well, and we are bringing on, turns out Adrian, the technology may have eaten Adrian, but Scot Chadwick from Pearson will be on, and I know they're working on just that type of thing. So once he gets on, we'll talk about him, or we'll talk to him about the social media inside of the LMS per se, or inside of the institution's delivery system. Scott,
Exactly.
how are you? Are you there?
Great, guys. How are you doing?
We're good. It's always difficult. I've given presentations where I'm with Adrian, and it's never follow Adrian. So I don't know if we have a protocol that says never try to act like Adrian. But Scott, we have Jim Wallis on with us, and he is from St. Petersburg College in Florida. He's a professor there. And he's sort of given us the professor's view of technology, and we've had a good discussion. One of the questions he brought up is the use of, say, social media or a Facebook-style page that would be institution-specific. So it's not out there for the world to see. It's a place where the faculty members can engage, and the students can engage with each other and the faculty member, but yet it's not out there for public distribution. The pictures of them drinking beer at the pub isn't on there for professor to see when they should have been studying, or vice versa. So can you tell us a little bit about what some of the things you guys are doing to try to address that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. We approach certainly with some of the things that we're doing on our different learning platforms, both from a Learning Studio perspective and with Open Class, is to move in a direction where we can encourage collaboration and both between students and faculty that can be within a contained context and in a safe area where students can share information specific to their course. That is context specific and doesn't include things about their weekend plans, and that also those social connections that are established there are ones that we believe that they will want to maintain and persist. And so some of the things that we're incorporating into our learning platforms are the ability to have followers and to follow others and to connect with folks that you might initially connect with through a specific course, but you find that, hey, I'd like to stay in touch with this person over the course of my school career and be able to do so and have easy ways to communicate and collaborate with them, even if you're not taking the course with them any longer, but have those connections persist. So we believe that those things are certainly, it's really almost an expectation, a foundational expectation in our view, as we go forward in any kind of online learning.
Right. So one of the questions we had from an audience member, it seems like one of the things where I think we're not doing enough education-wise is to teach students how to be critical, conscious users of technology, how to look at the way technology nudges us to do some things and not pay as much attention to others. What's your initial response to that? Either one of you.
Well, certainly. I mean, we certainly know that the multitasker generation is ever growing, and the skill and ability to engage in a lot of different tasks at once extends to the learning environment. And so I think that as our approach within that is some of the platforms that we're developing have live chat capabilities If you think about the way Facebook works, obviously being able to post on the wall, but also using live chat capabilities and be able to connect with folks live via a variety of tools, whether it be chat tools or the video tools for that matter. We've incorporated all those into the platform in our philosophy of doing things that way to really help support however students may want to connect with each other, and that could be, quite frankly, all forms and mediums at one time.
And Scott, I apologize. We didn't give you a chance to introduce yourself, tell the world what you do. So if you'll take just a minute or two and introduce yourself, tell us what you do and sort of what your experience has been with technology, with pedagogy, with education in general, because I know you have a very strong background.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Thanks. My background, I'm with Pearson. I've been with Pearson for almost 9 years, and my focus within Pearson has been in working with institutions to help them grow successful online programs. So I spent over 7 of those years working with great folks like eduKan that are really just experts at delivering high quality education to students online, and our organization has really been focused on helping to support them be successful and doing everything we can as an organization to help them. I have been involved in working with folks at an executive level with their strategies and programs to deliver education online, and over the past couple years I have been leading a new group that we launched just last year formally, and that's OpenClass, which is another learning platform within Pearson that we've made available for free for institutions to be able to adopt and use in any way that they want in a self-service model. So I've been leading the development and launch of that program, and as part of that, exploring new ways of delivering education and looking at the development of high fidelity courses and content is really the one of the areas in the future that is the focus for us in terms of further engaging students and improving efficacy.
Jim, tell us about you have all of these students in your class and you interact with students all the time. Tell us, I don't know, maybe you're a great storyteller. Tell us some ways that social media has just gone wrong, some of the ways that students either in your class or maybe friending you on Facebook or just anything like that or it doesn't have to be about you, maybe stories from your colleagues that you've heard.
Well, I mean, I think that the one thing that hits us the most solid with social media is the speed that those things get disseminated with. Our students delight in the fact of, seeing us out in the real world. It's almost like we're zoo animals who have escaped sometimes. And, and suddenly they see their professor sitting, 2 or 3 seats down at the bar having a beer. And next thing you know, you're on their Facebook page about, hey, I saw my professor here and doing this. And in some cases, colleges are checking our Facebook pages and looking at places. And it's interesting is that the potential for social media is fantastic. We've seen it work to do tremendous things to get people involved in causes. But it's also like the world's worst game of telephone tag. I said this, the next person says it. By the time it filters through the system, it takes on a life of its own. And it draws our students into, a lot of non-purposeful activity, where, every 5 minutes, where they're at and what they're doing. And it's interesting when we were talking about the new Pearson system is that I'm always a little bit hesitant when we talk about integrating a social, application into it because, what is it our students are going to use it for? If it's course content, we're going to do great. If it's social, like, hey, Bob, what did you do last night? I met a new girl, whatever, then it becomes, unfortunately, part of the public arena. And for public schools, that's a challenge for us because, with the laws and the rules that govern us, that information is public access. And so students may share information online in those interactions between fellow students that in some cases could be potentially embarrassing or lead to some far worse consequences. And I'm always a little hesitant when we talk about, integrating that. And a substantial number of instructors have dropped Facebook pages, dropped Twitter, dropped their feeds because there's a wide potential for, negative impacts on that. And it just takes a simple moment of a student saying something that they may not mean in any kind of spite, but it takes on a life of its own. So we have to be concerned with that. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I would love to be able to have a social media page where I talk as a human being to my students, where I can engage them in integrating the things they do through their regular life. What did you make last night for dinner? Hey, that's pretty cool. Did you know that this is something that's unusual in the ingredients? Like say saffron, something like that. But on the other hand, a substantial number of things you get are something you have to immediately delete off the pages. And then once you share, you're sharing with more than one person. So, right. But it's interesting because I've seen, I know Pearson, you're doing it with the Pearson products, and other places have tried it. My favorite one still goes back to chat rooms within classes. And I know all of us have had chat rooms in classes, but you post an assignment, you provide them a chat room, and it goes from talking about the assignment to a giant spontaneous, rave online. So, we get stuck with this idea that, once you put it up, it's for whatever you want to use it for, even though you title it, hey, this is to talk about your upcoming project. So I think instructors have become a little gun shy with some social media. We see some fairly terrifying stories out there of how instructors, innocently enough, have become embroiled in some pretty horrific stuff, even though they were not themselves actually at that particular point. So it's almost like, being associated with it because you're a friend of that person or whatever. I think it also bucks the trend among instructors that, your students are not your friends, they're your students. And even later on, while you may have a few friends in your career, most of your students always stay your students. So, and they're always going to have to be an arm's width away from your social media. But if you could do the social media in your... Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say a comment from Ruben in the audience says that saying that excluding their lives from the learning, such as their weekend plans, hits part of one of those issues I see a lot in the classroom, creating even more separation between their learning and their lives. I think this makes it even more difficult to map their learning to the wider world than it would normally be. Why not let it all gel together rather than trying to isolate the class? I feel like we as educators are more distracted by their distractions than they are. Thoughts?
I mean, well, if you're going to say it, if putting it in that manner, yes, we all believe that learning is part of their environment. But, if we're talking about, say, evolutionary biology and, Joe Smith is talking about his plans to go to Olive Garden later on, it's the idea of relevant conversation. I'm all for, I'll give you a perfect example. Every time in my class we talk about parasites, any kind of weird animal that gets inside people's bodies, students come up with all kinds of bizarre stuff. That is fantastic, right? I want to hear about the weird stories that they don't want to share in class, but they're willing to send to me through a link, right? But on the other hand, right, you go beyond that. You start sharing medical stories not related or, personal episodes of illnesses. I mean, while those things are interesting in the scariest way possible, they're not necessarily either enhancing the teaching or they're putting in interference. They're providing a layer of information that is blocking the actual focus of the material you're trying to teach. So, and here's the thing.
So
dinner plans,
you're saying,
all those things. Go ahead.
You're saying you don't want to see pictures of my tapeworm, I take it.
I would, actually, if you could actually beat the record size, I'm all for that. Especially if, you could actually pose face-to-face with it, something like that. But, honestly, that wouldn't be bad. Yeah. Here's two of them. They had babies, So, but I think that if we're looking at, what you had for dinner last night with your wife out at, and your kids, it's just information maybe we don't necessarily have. I think you have a good point in incorporating social media, but we're almost saying to the students, hey, we'll let you decide what's appropriate. And then the problem is later on, as a school, as an entity, then we have to jump in and say, well, that wasn't appropriate. So we're almost always backfilling the promise of social media. And, it's been a great tool. Look at how many countries have benefited from, showing what's going on in their country. But on the other hand, flip that over and I dare any one of you to go, grazing through Twitters and Twitter tweets and Facebook postings and see that most of them are talking about, their current update is, hey, I walked into, Neiman Marcus and now I'm going to the restroom. Now I'm in the restroom. So, it's like the feeds are a little too much of their lives shared with you at that particular point.
Yeah, absolutely. I just another comment on that. I think it's a very interesting topic for us. The approach that we've taken is one to consciously not integrate Facebook, not integrate Twitter directly. Though we've seen some instructors integrate Twitter into the platforms. What we've done is actually emulated those kinds of capabilities, those social capabilities, both from a posting and following and tweeting, essentially within the platform, with tools that emulate those Facebook and Twitter, essentially, so that it does at least contain it within a bit of the walled garden. And I think it's an interesting question that we've come up with as we've seen folks even in the K through 12 space begin to adopt these tools, and to see them ask the questions of themselves of how soon do we make these tools available to students within the classroom, and what if they do say, post something that's inappropriate, and some have said, oh, that's, we don't want to make that possible. The others have said, well, we need to begin to teach students that part of the world, and that interacting and leveraging these tools in a social way, maybe it's better to have those possible within the classroom, and be able to advise students of things that are appropriate and not, as opposed to them just learning them on their own. So it's been an interesting debate that we've seen come up, not only at the higher ed level, but also in K through 12, where schools are making those decisions.
And I think Teddy online said, one, they weren't interested in seeing pictures of my tapeworm, but two, that I think it's a little different than students can post without us having any opportunity to intervene as we could in a face-to-face classroom. And if we are training students to be productive citizens, isn't this part of a dilemma that they're going to have to face in the workforce? That, what a great opportunity to learn, okay, that wasn't appropriate in the college setting versus when they get out into the workforce and their boss says, wait a minute, you can't do that. You can't post that. And we've just sort of let them run amok sort of around us without us trying to intervene and help them with that. Thoughts?
Well, I would say that.
I totally agree. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I see it as the fact that, at some point, though, there's a lot of responsibilities being passed to us as educators. And at the college level, I'm kind of hoping that they've kind of figured those things out. But at the same time, it's a tier approach. I teach, and then I have this, and then I have that. And so at some point, we're piling a lot of responsibilities on top of the educational aspects of it. Like we all know that the college is also not only an educational tool, but it is a social tool. You get in with your peer group and see things. But on the other hand, who's particular been on the whole idea of social media? Which instructor are we going to let put that viewpoint in? I think it's a great question. I think we need to get a room full of us together and say, just what would you allow? What do you want? What do you want to see? What about putting, when Pearson puts the social media in, what about the ability to delete posts? Well, I'll tell you what, if you ever want to see students get all up in arms about that, they'll start bringing about their freedom of speech thing. And I have to tell them, in my environment, you don't really have that. Unfortunately, those rules don't apply in an educational environment. And they're crushed. They're suddenly, their flag waving and rioting in the streets moment is gone. But it's the idea that, how it is. Let them police themselves, see how they do. But in the long run, most of the educators would tell you that we're going to have to step in. And the problem is, in many cases, education being a fairly rule-rigid environment, most schools want to see something in place to govern those kinds of ideas. And in many cases, we're trying to play catch-up. As we put a rule out, I would never think of using profanity in a classroom, in a chat with a class or anything. But my students, I will use words fairly frequently that are like, you can't do that. So, I mean, to me, it's one of those things. You're educated, you shouldn't have to do that, but they do. And in some cases, we end up having consequences that go far beyond that. I like the idea, but I guess, it's the hesitation of taking on a life of its own. It starts off as a tool and it becomes a stampede. And the thing is, go ahead.
Gretchen says, we're all learning how to use this constructively. Both students and faculty have to work together to make this more effective for education. And haven't instructors always guided classroom conversation? How is this different?
Ooh, time delays one.
And so I think to your point, I think to your point, it may be that right. What you said, you don't have those, freedoms of, that you thought to say anything or do anything in my classroom. Just as we would stop a student in a face-to-face, if we see that happening on the social media side, I think we should stop that also. I think you're exactly right.
And there is a tragedy involved here, which is, you've made the point, is that in many ways we're killing the creativity to keep the rule in place. Mm-hmm. So the creativity is there, and in many ways our students can express it as appropriately as we would want, because of course they use words we normally would not use to connect things together. But in some cases they're very creative, and we're wiping out that creativity because the words they use are not graceful. And so I would love to be able to extract the meaning and say, yes, that's a great point, but the way you put it is astonishingly poor. So, but the problem is that if that's offensive to, say, Sally in class, then she oftentimes won't come to me. She's up administration saying, so-and-so used the word ass in class instead of butt for an anatomical term, let's just say, and, she skips past the instructional stage and she's up there. And so the backlash, of course, in administration is to start putting out rules, which then, of course, suppress the creativity. So, I mean, I have very creative students who use profanity like sailors. But the stuff they have to say is extremely interesting. But you have to weed out the kind of consistent barrage of, fairly poor language or poor social skills. So, and it makes it tough. So when you're putting out that information, you're kind of stuck with a real message embedded in a substantial amount of either offensive or fairly horrifying stuff.
Gail says, if you equate this to the residential campus, you make a good point that the professor isn't the RA in the dorm where social learning occurs.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting comment. Let's talk a second about maybe technology that has maybe run amok. And again, this is my opinion. MOOCs are the hottest thing right now. Everybody wants a MOOC. I equate it to the academic pet rock. Everybody wants one. Nobody really knows what to do with it. But it's they're out there. The pedagogy behind these MOOCs are awful. 100,000 students, one professor. It is like the worst of everything we know about how students learn. Mm-hmm. But every institution is running to start a MOOC. Some thoughts. I know, Jim, I don't know, your MOOC, I don't know how many 100,000 students you have in your MOOC. But I know Pearson is working with a lot of schools who are doing MOOCs, and I just want some perspective on MOOCs. Am I missing the point that what's going on out there?
I'm going to flip this over to Pearson because
Sure.
it's been embraced by a substantial number of publishers. So.
Yeah, I think our view is that, certainly in mine in particular, I think that there's certainly a positive aspect of the MOOC, and that it's expanded access to education for individuals around the world. So I would certainly argue that it has helped to raise the water level for everyone. And that's a real positive thing. I don't think that, I think that there's opportunities from there to improve on the model and be able to also incorporate the local instructor and the local institution. I think that there is, in our view, there is a model where technology can be leveraged, and the capabilities that the positive capabilities that the MOOC brings, and that being able to connect with a broader number of individuals in a particular course or in a discipline area, but also have a defined role for the local instructor and the local classroom. So actually, that's the direction that we're going. So our view is not to necessarily recreate what exists already from the folks that are delivering the as currently defined MOOC today, but in fact look to what the next iteration of that is, and developing a new way of delivering those courses that benefits benefits students in a broader way.
I do agree. I mean, I think that there's a lot of potential. I think that we sometimes it's very much a box of information, and you have to kind of weed through it until you find the parts you want. And I would be the first one to say that nothing we see in terms of enhancing education should be thrown out initially. I think, though, that we want to make real sure, though, by the time it reaches the stage where everybody's putting into place, we're really, here's the thing. We get a lot of technology, but we don't see the backfill in terms of its application and its usefulness. So, whiteboards and computer boards and all the other things, it's very interesting. You get these interactive boards into the classroom, and they end up being more work in some cases than how well they help with your classroom. So, it's funny how quick we adopt something, and then we have to backpedal and say it doesn't work like we thought it was. It works great when it's in an unstructured environment or when it's in certain, even subject areas, but we just can't have these wholesale adoptions of a certain kind of pedagogy or a procedure or a process or a technology, thinking that it's going to fit every single niche we have in education. And in many cases we do. We saw widespread adoption of a lot of particular technologies that just fell by the wayside because they didn't work for everybody. Science is heavily technology invested, but in many cases, the technology is specific to the individuals, not to the classroom. I mean, I'm not going to do a large scale, microchemistry or a micro analysis on some material for everybody. That's a one-on-one person's kind of thing. So, I'm always kind of cross when these things show up, because we get these groundswells of support for something new, and then they hit us, and then everybody's going, I don't quite see the point. And then you have to kind of backpedal and fill in the cracks in between.
And we have hit the MOOC hot button. The comments are out there. Let's see. From Gail, MOOCs may be the way to dig deeper in advanced courses and problem solving. Let them prepare for free and have an enhanced experience in class. And I think, Scott, that's exactly what you're talking about, using the expertise of someone who is a leader in the field, requiring that as part of the assignment in the class to go out, participate in this, and then bring that back to a classroom discussion that we're going to have on our local campus or in our local class.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's a great take on it. It's our view that there's great expertise that you can leverage out there from some of the best minds in a variety of topic areas, and finding a more effective way to bring that into the local classroom and how it's being taught. I think that's our view. That's the best of both worlds.
I would agree with that.
Ed says, I think it's too early to condemn or condone. I think we're still wrestling with a definition. For self-learners, it may be a good idea. It certainly challenges the boundaries we've built around courses. One of the interesting things about the MOOC and the MOOC process is at most institutions, it has cut out the faculty senate, the faculty committee, the approval process. They just go, they launch. And it's cut out a lot of the assessment. It's hard to really truly assess and validate the students' learning, which brings a whole new topic about how we authenticate our students. But the really good thing I think about MOOCs, and I didn't mean to completely condemn MOOCs, because I think you're exactly right. They have a benefit. I think what it's also doing is challenging maybe some folks like the Department of Education and the regional accrediting bodies that say, why can't we award credit for this? Why are you tying this to seat time? Why, some of these things that are being pushed, these MOOCs, when you get someone like a Harvard or a Stanford or a Columbia behind and saying, we're going to do this, it's pretty powerful pressure against some of those agencies who are really struggling with how to keep up with what technology is doing to learning.
And I agree. I mean, they're bound in concrete with the way they evaluate how we do things. I mean, as education progresses and becomes different, they have not made substantial changes. And you're right, seat time, student contact time. I mean, those things are all limited by the same definitions we've been using since, the 50s. So, and that's a problem for us and for textbook publishing and for, bringing in dynamics. And, I know that we use a system called Connect with, I think, is a pretty good system. But I would have if I was evaluated by the Department of Education, do they actually see that students are working online outside of the normal class hours? So I end up having more class hours than I have required by the statutes, but they don't see those hours, so they may not necessarily look at it that way. And that falls for any of those external processes we may use to teach. I think that's a big area we need to improve, which is the idea that we really have to broaden the definition of those ancillary technologies we use to teach. Otherwise, we're going to be hurting pretty badly as this technology becomes more integrated. They're going to be farther and farther behind the understanding of what we actually do. So, it's like I give you a second point to this. It's online office hours. Well, you mentioned that to some of the accrediting agencies. They just freak out. How do you prove they were there? How do you know that person was doing stuff? And the idea was, that's how we allow our distance students to have time. Between 2 and 4, I'll be sitting here kind of like we're doing now. And if you want to talk to me, pop in and I'll give you a conversation. But, the Department of Ed sees me talking to my computer in my office, thinking I'm a little off my, kilter there, not understanding that I'm providing quality education to somebody who's not sitting in the same room with me. So, all these things always have to go through the process of that. And honestly, in some cases, we're looking at, they're looking at stuff that we did years ago as current, and we're, 5 or 6, 10 years ahead of them in that. And so we're still trying to, hey, go that direction for a while and look at what we're really doing. You're looking at something we did 5 years ago.
Right.
So,
and Gretchen goes along with that and said, I think it is going to push higher education to redefine our role in certifying who has knowledge. Why go to college when you can learn it online? How do we still fit in a world of ubiquitous knowledge? Gretchen is the queen of disruption, and ubiquitous knowledge is one of those words that, she likes to use. And if you look at, Clayton Christensen's work with, disruption that's occurring in education, and the thought and their prediction that by 2019, half of all classes taken at the high school level will be online. We at the collegiate level better be figuring out that when a student shows up, they've taken half of their classes in an online format, and we tell them that they have to show up at an 8 o'clock class and sit there Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They're going to look at us like we've lost our mind.
Well, and that's what they're doing. I mean, if you look at school statistics for the number of online students and the proximity to the campus, the vast majority of online students are within 5 or 6 miles of the campus. And that was not the original intent of that idea. It was to provide those students who had difficulty in commuting. But, if you look at the makeup of any online class now, it's, they're just doing it so they don't have to leave the place. We always think of it as, pajama school. There's even that, ad online for Pajama U, which is basically hilarious, and I hate it. But, it's the idea that a substantial number of our online students are our local students. And, why go online when you can meet with us? And my charming personality, of course, is involved in that. But they elect to take them online. So I think that it doubles our difficulty, because then we have, a lot of question on why are your students who could be in class online, and why aren't they coming to class? And, we know the answer to that, but it's much harder to prove to us, in other groups that why they're there. So I think that's a complex question. It's one of the ones that we deal with all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about.
Sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, go ahead, Scott. Go ahead.
I just think that I think that that's what's been interesting over this past year as Coursera and Udacity have become, what they are, and more of these courses have become available to a lot of folks. I think it has brought the visibility and attention to online. That's been a good thing, and I think it has caused institutions and instructors to think about, how am I teaching my course, and am I engaging students to the best in the best ways that I can, and how else can I do it? So I think it is good in some regard to help everyone think through, could I be doing things better? How can I be improving in the way that I engage students and make it more interesting for them? So I think that's a good thing.
Scott, we worked on a project, as you know, with Pearson, and it's interesting for what has historically been a textbook company to start doing more in the digital realm. I mean, I think it's a very smart move on their part. One of the projects we worked on was Project Aristotle, where we did away with the textbook. We allowed our faculty members to go into the Pearson Vault of Knowledge to pick content from multiple publishers or multiple authors, multiple videos, exercises, put them all together into one class, all delivered digitally. It's in the LMS when it gets there, and it's saving our students a lot of money on textbook costs. It's saving our students, not having, the right edition of the book, not having the key code because they bought it through Amazon or they bought it through half.com. All of those things are eliminated. The content is there. But you talk to a traditional school, a campus-based school, and you say, why do you still have a bookstore? Why have you not gone the digital textbook route or the digital content route, not even the ebooks, but the digital content route, and implemented this? It's one area of technology where the learning, you can analyze, you can assess it, you can take it down to the learning asset level of what's working, what's not working. But yet, on the traditional campus, you start talking about doing away with the bookstore, and it's heresy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting time, no doubt about it. I think Pearson is moving very aggressively towards the use of digital materials. I mean, me personally, I want to help us get out of the business of cutting down trees as quickly as possible. And move to materials that are fully digital, but for the reasons that you mentioned, though, as well, Mark, which are that we can really understand what's working and what's not working to improve student learning, and make those materials more affordable. And so those are the things that we think are very, very interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of legacy processes and structures and things that are in place across education that have to work themselves out. At the same time, Pearson is moving in a path that is focused on not just the ebook, because the ebook doesn't necessarily get us there entirely either, at least in my view, that really moving to that next level where it's something that represents much more of an interactive course as opposed to an ebook, that's something that the ebook itself morphs into something that's if you take the Xbox example, that it's a digital learning experience in that game, that's what the course becomes, and that the LMS, as we think about it, really becomes the Xbox as the player, and that it really disappears into the background, and that the learning experience comes to the forefront, and that with a platform and an environment like that to develop on, those that have an interest and desire to develop high fidelity content have the ability and a platform to do so in a way that can be delivered to anybody and everybody, because it's the platform is free. So that we believe that there's a lot of great changes that are going on right now on that front, and we're excited about it. We think that we're very much at the beginning of some great innovations that we hope to highlight even next month at eduKan.
Jim, how about know any faculty who are saying, you know what, I am not dealing with the textbook. I'm going to build my course. I'm going to have all the content there for the students, and it's going to be there. You don't have to go to the bookstore.
Well, I mean, that's a push by a lot of folks. I mean, I do agree with a lot of the things that were said, but there's, it's a multi-tiered system there. We not only have the publishers, but then we have the bookstore to deal with. And in some cases, we're cascading problems in and students getting materials. And you're right, open source is becoming bigger. Most of us who've taught for a few years have a substantial library of, developed materials that we maintain. In some cases, it's very interesting is we could go off the book grid where we no longer have those materials. The class is free. It doesn't have those. But, it's the dilemma for us is the fact that, we get valuable resources from the publishers. We all agree on that. And, they maintain things for us. But the other side, of course, is our students are facing increasingly steep prices for books and difficulty in dealing with bookstores. Ebooks have helped. But, I mean, to counter back on the point is we have seen ebook prices go up substantially. So I'm going to use the example of, the Kindle, books started off at, $6, $7, $8, and now they're up to $17. So, it seems like, the students get the inroad, they get the break, and then the prices slowly go up. And I'll give you an interesting one actually that comes from Pearson is the idea that, they can buy a used textbook for $70, but the electronic version of the book is $90. And our students ask us, why would a book that's electronic cost us $90? And so there's the idea of realism in the pricing of a particular thing. I mean, we understand it took a team of people to do it. I often show my students the little thing you put inside the book where it shows all the people that contributed. But they're still hard pressed in these kind of times when an e-textbook is, $90, $95, and it's a nice system. And you brought up a very good point too, which was that format needs to morph. Right now, it's just the book printed online. It has a little bit of interactivity, but it is like the early Mac stuff with, HyperCard, where you just kind of pan through it. And we have not seen significant moves in animation and integration and cross-linking. And the other thing, of course, is once a book is out, updating. A lot of those websites that are attached to books after a while become outdated. And we don't see those links being updated. I am in total agreement with what you said. I would love to have every single one of my books be an electronic thing. And it's on both sides, too. Don't totally think it's you. The students oftentimes will say, I don't like ebooks. I don't like reading them. I don't like anything. And so they won't get them. But they're better, and they are right now a little cheaper. But that's a battle you guys are going to have to keep fighting on, is keeping those prices suppressed. Because I, just like you as a paper saver, would rather not see 328 pages of, text when I can see something that's put out in a form that's usable. But interactive, dynamic, current, updating those particular things. And I think those are something I think you would agree with, but in some cases we'll get new editions of ebooks that are just as outdated as the book that was before them. So I think that's something that's a great conversation for a lot of people to be involved in with each of the publishers, so that we can say, listen, you want us to go this direction, we will follow that direction if you can promise us the following things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think the cost pressures continue to force the prices down. Absolutely, and I think that is what needs to happen. What we want to have happen is that it becomes more affordable across the board, and that part of it is moving to digital, and part of it is just new business models coming into play that make it more commercially viable for any content producer to produce great content that can be adopted in a more modular way and used very broadly, that isn't defined within the models that we've used historically within the textbook or recently the ebook. It's something new.
You know what my favorite thing is the ebooks come out now, but when you turn the page, it actually turns in an animation of a page turning. And I love that kind of anachronism, because it's like, I'm going to the next page. Oh, look, it looked just like a page turning. And so even though we're in an ebook, you have the affect of turning the page in a book. which I know reassures me deeply to make me feel good that that happened. But it's kind of a funny idea that animation is still there. And the other one I love is the bend over the corner page thing with ebooks, which is, if you want to remember this spot, I don't mind the bookmark, but some of them have that like bend a page over thing. And so as you're going through a neat textbook, and I've seen my students do it, they bend over every page. This is important the whole way through. But it's so weird to look at an electronic book and see the corner physically bent over, or at least, an animation-wise bent over so they can come back to that particular page. And it's not just you. I mean, it's in Kindles, it's in a few other things out there. So it's an irony that you have an up-and-coming technology with throwbacks to those kinds of things.
Yep.
Gentlemen, we are at the end of the hour. Was watching the feeds go by, and it seems like we have a topic for another show on student authentication. We have a topic for digitally embedded content and OER content. And so, the good news is we now have 2 more shows in the can that we can work on and find those great guests to come on and talk about. Just in closing, anything that you would like to sum up? Jim, we'll start with you and just give us your closing thoughts.
I think that we're something that you and I had kind of talked about. We're in the midst of a fairly substantial change in how we present materials to students, and I think that in the things we've talked about, we see the point, which is it's always the collaborative approach. I think the evolution of this process is beyond our ability to slow down. We're going to go that way. But getting in the dialogue and getting people involved and making sure that, we're not leaving groups out and we get a product that, the publisher can sell, the teacher can use, the student can get into is important, because in some cases we haven't seen that collaboration. We haven't seen those kinds of ideas, and we get a product that everybody's happy with, because the publisher has to hear from the instructors and the instructors hear from the students, and it ends up a mess. But I think that if we ran this one right and we got that kind of a collaborative effort and really push to make it a quality product from every publisher, then we would be a lot better off, because you're right, we save trees, we save time, we have something that's portable. But it's also the idea that integrates with the idea that technology really does have a lot of application in our classroom, and that is one area where, you're in a classroom that's multimedia oriented and students are still opening paper books. And there's a lot of irony in that moment. So I think that the discussion brings up the good points that we really need to focus on and how we hit all aspects of teaching, from content delivery all the way to what's sitting on your desk in front of you in terms of, the material you need for class.
Scott?
That's absolutely perfectly said there, Jim, and I couldn't agree more. It's a really fun time right now, I think, to be in the industry and to see the changes that are happening and the pace of that increasing. And we're as enthusiastic as ever about what this means ultimately in terms of impacting education, in terms of the quality of education, but also the cost of education and the availability of education. All those things we think are being benefited by that. We could not be more excited about what we see coming over the next 6 months and over the next year even.
Perfect. Gentlemen, thank you for taking your time today. Thanks to the audience members who were out there who participated. We will post this so you can share it with your friends, family, send it out in your Christmas card, the link to your stardom there on eduKan TV. Thanks a lot, and we will post our date and time for our November show coming up in the next week or so. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Thank you. Had a good time.
Bye.
Take care.
See you later.